Hello, welcome to season 4 of How to Play D&D, the explainer podcast with one experienced dungeon master and one failed scriptwriter to discuss D&D topics. My name is Kinsey, and my illustrious guest this week is Lucas Hall. Hello, Lucas.
Hello, Connor. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm all right. Better for seeing you. It's been a lovely
Of
sunny
course,
day
yeah, such a
indoors.
charmer. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, straight away. You've got, I've dressed up. I've dressed up. You've literally just got back today from D&D in a castle.
Well, I mean, as close to D&D's in the castle as I can get without paying the price tag. But
Yeah.
yes, been DMing all day yesterday in the castle, which was amazing scenery, extremely daunting, but was really good fun, to be fair.
Incredible. When this episode airs, you would have done it like 2-3 months ago. It just looks
Yeah,
like to
that's
anyone
fair.
listening that you just D&D in a castle often. Like
Of course I do, yeah, all the time.
yeah,
Yeah.
where's your summer castle this year? Like so good.
Oh, fair,
Um,
fair.
so you've selected a topic for the DM season.
Yeah.
Do you know what the topic is? Can you tell us?
It is world building as far as I'm aware, unless you want to surprise me with something completely new.
No, that's it. Let's get to it. Okay, so today's episode is on world building in D&D. World building can be insanely rewarding experience as a creative and as a DM, but it's not an easy feat to get right in order for your players to flourish. Take Putin or Trump, for example. Bad world building leads to anarchy and lack of trust. What do you think, Luke?
I mean, they have been strong influences on many BBEGs in my campaigns, to be honest.
100%. I don't usually get political, but I thought
Why
they are
not?
actually
Yeah.
doing exactly that right now, so why not?
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's. I don't think it's long before a few of us do start collecting as adventuring parties and going out
Oh,
there to fight the
100%.
power.
100%. Right. Luke, I've convinced a large group of Tritons to ferry me to Barbados for a handsome fee. Little do they
Nice.
know that handsome fee is my body. What am I doing?
Destroying your DM. No, that's what you're doing. Generally, that's what happens. Just like, oh no. Because I know for 100% certain that if you were rolling for that, you'd roll an out 20, and I'd be like,
Ah,
fine. Sure, I
yeah.
guess that happens. Yeah.
Scarred-eyed thoughts in your head as you have to describe every moment of it. So-
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, let's get to the proper questions.
Wicked.
What does world building entail?
What's oh, blooming hell, that's a big question.
Big question.
I
Question.
mean, yeah, it is a big question, but I suppose it is the crux of what this is. I mean, world building for me, like at the heart of it, is just finding spaces for you and your players to tell this story, whatever it may be. It takes obviously many forms. You can do it on your own, building different parts of a world. You can do it with your players collaboratively, particularly when they bring in backstories, which always change anything you've put in the world. Um, and equally, it does just kind of happen improvisationally as you're playing the game, and different things happen, different roles happen, and everything brings up. So I think it never really ends either. It's the big thing. You are constantly world building, you are constantly putting stuff together. But there's many sort of facets that come into it, I think, for me, and it's fun to see how it transpires as games and campaigns go on. Because what I had at the start of my campaigns when I started building my world to now is vastly different.
Yeah, I don't. You touched on a really good point there. Is like I pre-planned my campaign like homebrew
Yeah,
maybe a year in advance. I was getting the miniatures together. I've made a full thing on
yeah.
GM Binder. I'd pre-written many sessions like a full, and then as you go along and something happens, you go, oh, actually, yeah, there's a town there, and now actually there's a prison, but there's more to the prison than you think. And I was like, yeah, I wasn't thinking that either, but on the fly. And so yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
There's no one way of doing it, right? And
no.
it can be on the fly, and I hadn't thought about that so much.
No, it can be, and it happens more naturally. And equally, there's things where, like, if you prep like this whole thing about this town, and then your players go, "Do you know what? Actually, let's take the left path instead of the right,"
Yeah.
and you're like, "I guess this town is moving to the right." Yeah, like,
And do you know
bits
what?
like that.
Sometimes jokingly, but most often not, you will say like, like north is this, east is
Yeah,
something you really don't want to go. It's boring. And they go, do you know what? Fuck it. I want boring. And you're like,
Oh,
please,
100%.
please don't go boring. There's nothing there. It's the void.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
it's the bit on the video game where you get and it's all just blurred lines. You can't go
yeah.
any further. You're like, you've reached
You,
the end of the world.
you
Yeah.
literally are like any Elder Scrolls game, just like
Yes.
hopping the frame rates up the mountain that doesn't go anywhere.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Can you give an example of good world building that new DMs may know already?
Oh, good world building as well. DMs may know already. I think for me, and what's been the biggest influence on me in world building, I think many DMs or GMs, particularly in the last few years, is Exandria and Critical Role and how Matt builds his world.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the best advice I've ever seen is what he gave, which is actually when you're starting, depending on what you're doing, but start with a town. Don't get too big into the political systems at first, particularly if
Yeah.
it's level one characters. Start with a small town, like Stilburn in Exandria or wherever, and build out from that because naturally things will happen. People will come in with characters, and that will change the landscape. Um, but otherwise, you can overwhelm yourself so quickly with being like, here's an entire world, here's all these countries at war, complex political systems. You know, if this person does this, I mean, this is going to happen over the other side of the world. And sometimes that is completely irrelevant for the campaign you're going to run. It's good to have and good to know. But I think the smaller you start, the less overwhelming it can be. And I know for me, with someone with ADHD, the less overwhelming it is, the more likely it is to actually happen. So,
Yeah, no, totally fair. I think it's often the crux of people's world building is it's because there's some kind of infighting between it's instantly
yeah, of
political and you go,
course
well,
it
good
is.
luck keeping that up, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely. We've all done it. We've all been like, do you know what? These countries have got this beef and that beef and all of that. And you're like, okay, well, actually, if something happens in this country, if all my adventurers come and, I don't know, kill this king, there's a power dynamic then that's going to
yeah.
change that I've then got to think about and build. And they're not going to think about it because they'll just come in, kill him, and be like, yay, we won. So it's one
Done.
of
Yeah,
those
it's
things.
hard to keep that like keep the mantle that high up
100%.
for the
100%.
whole thing. Um, what are the pros and cons to building your own world?
I mean, the pros are it is completely up to you and your imagination. You can make things up. No player will know or be able to sort of metagame as such
Hmm.
and go, well, I read that book and I know that this is here or this happens and this should happen. Not that all players do that, but I'm sure we've all encountered a few in amongst our times of playing. So it is completely up to you and whatever you want to do. Um, you can create it how you want, pulling influences from any culture, world, stories. It's great for that. I suppose the downside is kind of the same thing. It is completely up to you and your imagination. And sometimes it can be nice and easy when you open it up and be like, oh, here's everything I need. But there's ways around that, I think. As someone that mostly plays homebrew as opposed to the sort of pre-written adventures by like Wizards or any other TTRPG,
Hmm.
um, I love it for that. I love the improvisation. I love coming up with things on the spot, and that can happen in the world building. It's a little bit easier when it's your world, um, but there is a place for the pre-written adventures, and I have definitely sort of looked through them and gone, actually, that's really useful. I'm going to use that, but just sort of change it a little bit, reflavor it from my world, so it doesn't have to be completely up to just you and the vast void of your imagination.
I think that's a challenge. Like we were just saying with like
Yeah,
bringing in a political system to start it off and then being like trying to keep it at that level
yeah,
is the home. I've only ever really played homebrew as a DM and
mm.
then always played in module pre-written modules
Yeah,
as a player. But is I seem to get way more immersed in when I'm a player because I know it's safe that it's in a module and
yeah,
that it's been fleshed out for the DM. Whereas on my
yeah,
own, I know the challenges of actually trying to keep that like tone in that
yes,
world and make sure that it always feels right to be there, let alone what's in it, you know. And that's like a just the what you feel is probably like the hardest thing to
yeah,
keep going, you know.
yeah. It definitely is, and I think over the course of a campaign, like tone can change in anything anyway. But I know what you mean. It can be tough to keep up like one particular image or theme across a world.
Yeah.
And equally, if even if you look at like our own world of Earth, which sometimes we all live on and, and take part in, even though we don't want to, maybe. But there's different sort of levels of technology, levels of political systems, and all that across our own world. So,
Mm.
not that obviously you're not necessarily going to be transporting all over the world when you're doing a campaign, but it's possible, particularly when people get high
Yeah.
levels. We get druids and wizards that can teleport wherever they want, and you're like, great.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah.
Yeah, guess I've got to come up with something now. But um, but I think that's always something to keep in mind when you're doing it. And I know when I've built my own world, I've tried to, it's heavily sort of D&D influence and fantasy influence, but I've tried to keep it somewhat system agnostic so that I can also pull in other systems and bring in other bits and pieces where I want to,
Yeah.
particularly if I'm doing one shots and things like that, which have changed many parts of my world that I hadn't even thought of yet.
Yeah, nice, nice. Do players collaborate on some level with your world building?
They do for me. I think I always like to give players, particularly when it comes to their backstory and where they're from, I might give a little bit of like, hey, from the vibe you've given me, this place might fit in better. But
Nice.
equally, if they've got something like completely fleshed out, like one of my players was like, right, I want to come from this mountain that is home to this family of blue dragons. They've like adopted me, and I was like, cool, I'm putting it in the world then. Like,
Yeah,
so and all of that, and equally like for other players, they're like, well, I wanted to have traveled around a bit and have seen X, Y, and Z. And I was like, well, yeah, I can make those like small villages or settlements or just individual people you've met along the road in this country. And so that's then added to my world. Because as much as, it is, I guess, my world, it doesn't feel like mine. It feels like our world when I'm thinking of my
yeah,
players. Um, but I want them to have influence on it, and I think it almost creates an instant immersion to some degree because they've had a part in it, they're
yeah.
invested in it.
Agreed. Yeah.
Particularly when they go to their hometowns and stuff, and it's like, well, I made this bit and I made that bit. And it's like, yeah, go for it. Like,
Yeah, we in the last episode we ran just now, last week. The players are in my campaign, they're in it like a limbo essentially, and they
okay,
are, regardless of their alignments, trying to get back to the regular place.
yeah,
And so they're working together, which is great conflict because they're not the
yeah,
same kind of person. But they had the ability to just kind of look into a mirror and just have what they desire based on
yeah.
a trade. They made the trades, and then one of the players got to walk into his town. But he
Wow,
decided, I described the town exactly as he had previously told me in his backstory
yeah,
a year and a half ago, and he openly just, I've said it like to the
mm,
word of what he's written. He said, "This isn't my world," and I was like, "Oh, okay." And then he was like, "Because last time I was there, this happened," and I was like, "Right, okay." And I thought, well, that's not worked in my favor, you know. He's
yeah.
like, I think I will go back there, but I know that I'm being tricked here. And the mirror was a trick, but
Oh, fair play.
he actually had like still had concepts of this town in his head, you know, and I weren't
Yeah,
sure if that was going to go like left or right. And
yeah,
it kind of made it better because then he was like determined to one, escape this trick he was in, but
yeah,
also, you know, actually go and fix what's broken in his head for the world.
yeah.
What he'd written was a perfect world, you know.
Oh,
So
I love that.
yeah, it was really, I thought it was going to be hit and miss, and I was like, oh great,
Yeah,
not, he's not updated the backstory or whatever, but it
yeah,
worked.
yeah.
It worked really well. It was nice to
That's
see
good.
that like he'd continued to think about it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think, and that's what's nice. I know similarly with my players, sometimes when they've, even now, I'll get like emails or, well, emails, notes going, hey, I've just thought about this and adding this because of last session and this cracked off. So I want to kind of figure out where that's come from. And and it might be, I'm trying to think of one. One was like, oh, I want the druid that I've got. They were like, I want some half orcs to be in the village because that makes sense for why I was like so upset when I saw some being hurt over here. And I was like, go for it, of course, yeah, we can add that
Yeah,
in. It's no issue for me. It makes sense. So like you say, but it is that investment and wanting to be a part of it and continually building it,
yeah,
which helps and is good.
definitely. Last question already.
Blimey, heck.
Can you give an example of how you built a world and what did that look like?
Wow. I mean, I feel like I'm constantly building my world. So yeah, the world that I built, it started really with just an idea of what I wanted the campaign to be. It started with I wanted the campaign to be roughly about there is a place in the, this is going to sound extremely political in a second, but there is a place in the world where magic is outlawed and banned and they cannot use it. So I wanted characters that were all magic users of some variety, whether it's just they had a couple of spells, but there was something because they could be anything. Because I had a wild magic barbarian, for example, so it's they could still do things like that. Um, and I wanted them to be there and in just conflict with this place because it's completely against their identity, who they are. They're being openly sort of mocked and outlawed and banished to create that tension. So that was the initial idea. And then it builds from there. So it's like, well, it's going to have some kind of corrupt government or king in this instance. So it's got a center. And then from that, I was like, well, all the money's going to go into this capital. So there's going to be areas that are poorer and worse off, and taking some influence of like sort of 1800s London and like Sweeney Todd, that kind of like poor, sort of dirty city that
Mm.
other characters came from, where it's not as outlawed, but there's other stuff going on. I won't spoil it in case my players listen. Um, and things like that. So it started like that really as a concept and spotting a couple of places that I was like, okay, this makes sense to have them sort of central places where stories happening. Then I brought the players in to be like, so this is the idea. You give me characters and where you kind of want them to be from. So a couple are like, well, I don't want to be from this country. I want to be from further away and I've traveled in. Fine, that makes sense. And then I can start to build a bit of a continent here. And it just started happening like that, really. And then the more that we started playing in the beginning, the more world building I kept doing. And building different bits and pieces at different times. And equally watching like TV shows or Critical Role or other TTRPGs and actual plays and being like, that's a really good idea. I'm stealing that for that part of the world. And so
Yeah.
doing that and pulling bits together like that. And it is a continual process even now. It continues to build, it continues to grow. But I think as long as when you're initially starting out, if you've got a concept of what you want your campaign to roughly be about, or this is how I DM, I suppose.
Yeah.
Most of my campaigns, I'm like, right, this one was I wanted the dichotomy of like magic and power. So it is there are places where it's completely null and void, and there's places where it completely flourishes. Cool. I've got another campaign that is more about technological advancement, very sort of Aor in Critical Role or Netheril in like the old sort of Forgotten Realms one. So the sort of flying magical city. So there's areas where technology is amazing, and there's areas where it's not, and it's corrupted and people are using it. And then other games where I've looked at like nature and things like that. So my thing tends to work that way of what's
Yeah.
the central concept I want of the campaign? How do I want to break it, or how do you bring that into a world, and then kind of build from there? But starting really smaller with at least a country or a continent, as opposed to going right. Let's make the whole world right now.
Yeah.
So I think that's the best way. Yeah,
I think that is, yeah, I totally agree. Like you can have a big concept, but at least it
yeah,
doesn't need to be like at the feet of the players straight away.
yeah,
You know, like if you
yeah,
look at any good story, it always starts with someone just kind of in the middle of nowhere doing nothing.
yeah,
And something happens, and then they are kind of the world's revealed to
yeah,
them, right? And so it's kind of you can think like that as a DM too, that
yeah.
you could have it all your eggs in one basket straight away, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And you do have to think of like, especially if you're maybe starting a campaign, what level are your characters starting at? If they're starting at level one, even if they're starting at level three, it's like they're not going to be in the whole minutiae of like everything going on in the world.
Yeah.
Most people are just going to be, I mean, you think about like all of us, we might care about what's going on in different parts of the world, and we have much more access in our world, in our lives than we do in the magical world sometimes. But you're mainly concentrating on what's going on in your home.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it makes sense to build it that way or wherever you're living at that time and being like, okay, these are the issues going on in my home. And then you start to get more as they level up into the bigger world. And I think that's been a big part of my trying to plan things better of looking at actually what level are they, roughly what are they going to care about at that time. So
Yeah. It's also good to like counteract, we've talked about it previously on the podcast with people having backstories where they were like, I was like the world's greatest champion 5 years.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
well, you're level one, mate.
Yeah, I know.
Can't be. And so and that kind of also
Yeah,
reminds people that actually if the world is this small for now,
yeah.
I don't need to throw in the backstory of being the world's greatest champion. Like, I can
That's
be
it.
a farmer who wants more. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
That's
You
fine.
might be the world's greatest farmer, but for that town, like
Yeah,
so as
exactly. Yeah,
opposed to the
just
entire
grounding it.
world. Yeah,
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 just
exactly.
grounding it a bit. It makes it a bit more realistic and then a bit more exciting when they do
Yeah.
go further in the world.
Yeah, and that's it. And like we've sort of said, it gives you that flexibility then as a DM to if like the style of campaign you want to tell has changed a little bit, you've got the space to do that because you haven't
Yeah,
set it out from the beginning. But yeah, I think like you say, you do ground the players straight away and be like, we're all level one. Let's think about this like
yeah,
from that perspective. And then you can build incrementally as opposed to being like and overwhelming yourself as a DM by saying like this is everything in the world. You're like, you're not gonna have that yet, unfortunately. No matter how
yeah, yeah.
prepped you are, when you start a campaign, it goes out the window.
100%, 100%. All right, well, yeah, good chat. Good chat. Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
absolutely.
Today's adventure is sadly coming to a close. We are back again next week with a topic Fish bladders were often used to create alcohol over the last 200 years. Does that mean fish are immune to getting pissed? And as always, thank you for tuning in. And if you'd like to join in on the D&D action, then please follow us on Instagram at How to Play D&D, or check out the link in our bio to join our Discord server. Luke, where can we find your stuff?
You can find me on Instagram at nomadicbard93, I believe it is at the end, where I post lots of different content about D&D and do some giveaways sometimes. So yeah, stay tuned.
We'll put links in the bio for the
Appreciate it.
as well. So cool. I've been Connor Kinsey.
Cool. I've been Lucas Hall.
Good day.